Hello everyone. In this video, I'm going to be discussing a widely misunderstood concept in Islamic metaphysics, that is the annihilation in God or fanaʿ fi-llah. In Islamic mysticism and Sufism, the final goal is uniting with the divine essence. Does it mean that the human self essentially and absolutely perishes, annihilates in the divine essence? What is the annihilation of the will? What is the annihilation of human qualities? What is the meaning of the annihilation of the possible in the necessary? In this video, I'm going to be examining all these questions through the thought of a 7th to 8th century Iranian mystic, Mahmud Shabistarī, in the context of Islamic metaphysics. The content of this video comes from a paper that I have co-authored, and the discussion we are going to have here relates to the second part of that paper. The paper is about the human self, in which we examine what or who is the human self, what happens to it, him, her in the journey towards the divine, and what happens when the self reaches the destination. I will be putting the link for the paper in the description to make it accessible. In this presentation, because of the technicality of the matter, I will be presenting our findings through PowerPoint presentation. I hope this video helps clarify this misunderstood concept.
All right, down to examination. Annihilation in God or fanaʿ fi-llah. This is the title of the presentation. So I said I will be discussing the annihilation through the thought of Mahmud Shabistarī. His full name is this. He's generally known as Sheikh Mahmud Shabistarī. He's Iranian, born in 687 in Shabistar near Tabriz, Iran. He completed his education in Tabriz. His death is a matter of controversy, so he's said to be passed away in 720 or 740. His philosophical orientation reflects that of Ibn Arabi, and his poetic style is similar to Rumi and Attar. His most famous book is The Rose Garden of Mystery or Gulshan Raz, and in this paper, the majority of the examination circles around this book, together with Sa'adatnameh, his other famous book. So the objectives. The objectives in this video is to understand the Sufi concept of annihilation or fanaʿ, is to examine the implications of reaching the state of fanaʿ on the self, is to discuss the controversy surrounding Mansūr Ḥallāj's statement, Ana al-haq, I am the truth, and to analyze differing views on the essential annihilation of the human being. The question that I will address here: what is the annihilation in God or fanaʿ fi-llah? What happens to the self when it reaches the divine essence? Does annihilation here mean destruction? Does the self perish essentially and absolutely at this stage? What is the role of awareness and perception in the process of annihilation? How does the concept of al-aʿyān al-thābitah or fixed entities tie into the process of annihilation? According to Shabistarī, if you want to reach the divine, reach the real, you should purify your heart of otherness. And by otherness, he means the otherness of determinations, the plurality that is perceived in the corporeal world. He's saying that in the world there is only one existence. There is no otherness. You shouldn't be seeing yourself as a separate reality other than real. So purify your heart of otherness, says Shabistarī, and prepare it to host the friend, because چو تو بیرون شدی او اندر آید به تو بی تو جمال خود نماید. When you exit, he enters. To you, but without you, he shows his beauty. Here, Shabistarī is simply saying that you should get rid of your ego, your imagined self. You should reach the annihilation stage. But what does that stage mean? We are going to examine it in this presentation. The meaning of annihilation. In Islamic metaphysics, the word fanaʿ has a technical meaning other than what the English word annihilation suggests. As a term used in this context, fanaʿ does not mean absolute destruction or nothingness. As Yasrebi puts it, fanaʿ is moving from one stage to another in the wayfarer's perfection path. Wayfarer means journeyer. the person who's journeying towards the divine. It results from the mystical journey, and because this journey is a movement, the fanaʿ has gradations, has stages, different levels. We're going to examine different stages in annihilation process. Number one is annihilation of the will. Number two, annihilation of the attributes, human qualities. Now, annihilation of the will. The wayfarer should submit his will to God in everything. This is a station called contentment, or ridha, as Maliki Tabrizi puts it, in which the wayfarer wills everything per God's will. This submission and this contentment is the wayfarer's annihilation of the will. However, it does not mean that the journeyer's will perishes completely without identity in that of God. Neither does it mean that the wayfarers and God's will unite into one third will, nor does it mean that the two wills converge in the sense that they will the same things despite their being distinct. The fanaʿ ridha, or annihilation of the will, means that after long, arduous practices, the wayfarer knows what contents God, and he wills and acts accordingly. This is the key part. It's not that the will perishes completely. He just knows what contents God and wills in accordance with that contentment. That is called, in technicality, the annihilation of the will. Now, annihilation of attributes. In Naql al-Nusus, the Persian Sufi poet Jāmī asserts that fanaʿ does not mean the absolute or essential perishing of the wayfarer's self in the divine essence. Rather, it means the annihilation of the human qualities, attributes, fanaʿ, sifat. Let's see what it means. He says, contemplating the real, the wayfarer loses human aspects. That is, the wayfarer's human aspects weakens and his lordly aspect strengthens, dominating the former aspect. The wayfarer loses human qualities and attains divine qualities. This losing is fanaʿ, and this attainment is baqā billah, or subsistence in God, which is a second stage after the fanaʿ. In the fanaʿ, the wayfarer loses the will, the qualities, his awareness, his consciousness. Do human qualities absolutely perish in fanaʿ sifat? That is, annihilation of the attributes? Well, no, not absolutely. You can examine this through two terms. One, in Farsi, istighraq, absorption, and the second, taqarrub, or nearness. In the fanaʿ sifat, in the annihilation of attributes, qualities do not perish. Reaching this stage, the wayfarer is so absorbed in the divine light that he or she loses awareness and consciousness of these qualities. Therefore, in this stage, the annihilation of qualities is epistemic, not ontological. Now, nearness. In the journey, the wayfarer crosses different stages, nearing the real, and in each stage he attains new perceptions, the perceptions that did not hold in the previous stage. Considering this hierarchy, the fanaʿ sifat does not mean the perishing of qualities, but rather that the perceptions and qualities that hold in a certain stage do not hold in the next. Not that the wayfarer is not attentive to them, but rather that they do not exist in the new stage. The higher the wayfarer reaches, the more he or she loses human traits, and the more intensely he or she obtains divine traits. A very important discussion in the annihilation process is the discussion of awareness. Well, Yasrebi in his book Irfan Islami in Farsi discusses this extensively, and his discussion has its roots, I think, in Jāmī's thought. This is a quote from Jāmī, but before getting into this, let me point something out. In Ibn Arabian cosmology, the divine essence manifests himself internally in the world of God's knowledge, and he gives form, and I'm using form in quotation marks because they are not necessarily forms, archetypal forms like essences. They were intelligible forms of the divine names and qualities in the world of God's knowledge. Ibn Arabi calls them the al-aʿyān al-thābitah, the fixed entities. So in one aspect, they are the intelligible forms of divine names and qualities. In another aspect, their manifestation is what brings about the corporeal existence. So the fixed entities play a key role in creation. But how does this happen? According to Ibn Arabi, the divine light passes through these fixed entities. And what we see is a reflection, is a manifestation. But those manifestations do not bring the fixed entities into the world. But the fixed entities are basically nothingness. They are the whatness. They are the quiddity of the things in the corporeal form. So when we say they are manifested, their effects and principles are manifested. Have that in your mind, effects and principles. Now let's read Jāmī's text, again in his work Naqd al-Nusus. The annihilation of the possible in the necessary is the annihilation of the effects of the possible. This is what I was discussing. Not the perishing of its reality, like the annihilation of the beams of light in the sunlight, and the annihilation of the effects of the possible. Here is the important part, concerns the awareness and perception of the Gnostic's I-ness, not his body, soul, or humanity. Therefore, the wayfarer loses his awareness of the self at this stage. Ontologically, he is. Epistemically, he is not aware that he is. He is, as Rumi often puts it, drunk. Another interesting point, this time ontological, about the quote, Jāmī's quote, concerns the first sentence, specifically the effects of the possible. In Ibn Arabi's metaphysics, the cosmos does not have a real being, i.e., being qua being. Rather, it has an engendered being, which is the corporeal manifestation of the effects and principles of the fixed entities. This is what we discussed. Pay attention to this engendered being part. In other words, corporeal entities are the bodily manifestations of the effects and principles of fixed entities. Reaching the divine essence, the wayfarer loses his engendered being, not his fixed entity. So when the self reaches annihilation, his reality, his fixed entity remains. What is lost is the engendered being. So the annihilation of the engendered being is what Jāmī means in the annihilation of the possible and the necessary. The full sentence was, the annihilation of the possible and the necessary is the annihilation of the effects of the possible, not the perishing of its reality. Now we understand Jāmī's text better. Arguing for the wayfarer's fixed entity's annihilation, that is, if we are to argue that no, the human being essentially perishes in the annihilation, has another epistemic problem. Ibn Arabi in Risalat al-Wujudiyya rejects most Gnostics' approach in that they relate attaining the knowledge of God to the essential annihilation. According to the Andalusian Sufi, to speak of annihilation, first existence should be proved. However, the possible entities do not have real existence, that is, being qua being. Therefore, holding their annihilation is a mistake, says Ibn Arabi. Then he puts it in the context of a famous saying from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu. One who knows his self knows his Lord. This is a prophetic saying. And building on his earlier conclusion that possible entities do not have real existence, Ibn Arabi concludes that one who knows his self to have no existence or annihilation knows his Lord truly. So the human being does not have essential annihilation in the fanaʼ stage. It is only a matter of awareness and consciousness. And there are some philosophers who advocate essential annihilation of the human beings. And Hosseini Tehrani is one such scholar. He argues that because there is absolute oneness in the divine essence, it suffers no plurality. Therefore, when the wayfarer reaches this stage, he or she loses everything, including his reality, including his fixed entity. But this is problematic. Look, if the wayfarer loses his reality in the essence and nothing remains of him, then who or what exactly subsists in God? And we said subsistence after annihilation is a second stage. Subsistence in God is a second stage. So if we are to say that the human perishes essentially, who exactly or what exactly subsists in God? No one in this reading, because everything has already perished. As discussed, the step following annihilation is subsistence. However, subsistence has no meaning if the human is essentially and absolutely annihilated. This is a paradox, clearly a contradiction. Additionally, the wayfarer contemplates the real in annihilation stage and subsistence after annihilation. If the human's reality perishes, then who or what contemplates the real? In this problematic reading, nothing remains but the real. Thus, he contemplates himself, i.e., God contemplates himself. However, this way, the wayfarer's contemplation is not his contemplation anymore because there is no he at this point. This is another contradiction. Well, there are many people who, of course, reject essential annihilation, and one of them is Allāma Muhammad Hussein Tabatabai, the Iranian mystic, philosopher, Quranic commentator, and highly regarded scholar in jurisprudence and several other disciplines. So he was basically Hosseini Tehrani's master. So according to Tabatabai, annihilation in the divine essence does not necessarily mean the essential perishing of the wayfarer. There must be something of the human he refers to after annihilation, which is his fixed entity. The al-thābitah is what remains, the fixed entity, the reality is what remains. Furthermore, because this annihilation is a perfection in the human journey, says Tabatabai, if the wayfarer perishes essentially, there remains no one or nothing to claim this perfection. What or who has had this achievement? Moreover, the essential and absolute perishing of the human necessitates that God creates a new reality for the individual in the subsistence stage. This is very important. If so, this is a new creation, not subsistence after creation. Another contradiction. Therefore, reaching the annihilation in the essence, the wayfarer does not step into absolute nothingness. His fixed entity remains. Importantly, fixed entity survival does not cause plurality in the essence. In Ibn Arabi's metaphysics, fixed entities are eternally and essentially non-existent. They are not qualified by being qua-being or corporeal or imaginal existence, since existence is not, for example, a person, say Zayd, a male name in Arabic. Since existence is not one of Zayd's reality's attributes, existence cannot be qualified by perishing or non-existence. The corporeal beings have engendered existence, i.e., the absolute existence is determined existence formed by the principles and effects of the corporeal being's fixed entities. This engendered existence is annihilated in the divine essence, not the fixed entities. And because the fixed entities are eternally and essentially non-existent, their survival in fanaʿ does not threaten God's essential oneness. So this directly addresses Hosseini Tehrani's worry. He was worrying that if the fixed entities are to survive, even in fanaʿ, there would be plurality in the divine essence, and that contradicts God's oneness. This explanation addresses his worries. Now, we said that Mansūr Ḥallāj famously uttered, "I am the truth." Let's see what Shabistarī has to say about this. A mystic, Ḥarabī, Hosseini Ḥarabī, asks Shabistarī about this statement. Shabistarī says, "I am the truth" points to the secret of oneness. There is none other than the real to utter this. Like Ḥallāj, every particle in the world says, "I am the truth" in divine ecstasy, jazba, in the selflessness one experiences in the divine unveiling. Basically, what Shabistarī is saying is, look, every particle in the world utters, "I am the truth." But the human hears, realizes this utterance only in divine ecstasy, only when he is selfless, experiences that unity with the divine. There is a Quranic passage, chapter 17, verse 44. It says, "The seven heavens and the earth and whosoever is in them glorify him," God, "and there is nothing save that it hymns his praise, though you do not understand their praise." So in what sense do these things make this utterance? In what sense do they praise him? In Shabistarí's thought, his commentator Lahiji says, existence utter "I am the truth" in the sense that they subsist with God's existence, without whom they stay in nothingness. When does the wayfarer hear "I am the truth"? Well, according to Shabistarī, after purification of the heart. So purifying the heart, the wayfarer loses his determination, which veil divine beauty. Without himself, human. Without himself, he sees himself as the real. and through the real's tongue utters, I am the truth. So this is the divine ecstasy. This is where the human hears the divine, and it is the real who utters, I am the truth, through the tongue of the journeyer, says Shabistarī and his commentator, Lahiji. To put his discussion of I am the truth in context, Shabistarī refers to this Quranic passage. The Quran says, when Moses had set out with his family, he perceived a fire on the side of the mount. And when he came upon it, he was called from the right bank of the valley at the blessed site, from the tree, O Moses, truly I am your Lord, the Lord of the worlds. Alluding to these verses, Shabistarī writes, enter the right site, where suddenly a tree tells you, truly I am God. He's basically interpreting this line mystically, saying that when you purify your heart, the divine voice from within you will tell you that I am the truth, I am God, inni ana Allah, truly I am God. So Lahiji opens this up a little bit more in detail. He says the right sight implies the purification of the heart, and the tree exemplifies the reality of the mystic. Thus, through the purification of the heart, the mystic should discard the otherness and duality in his heart that cover the real. Doing so, the light will appear in his heart, uttering, I am the truth, as he did so to Moses. Then Shabistarī asks, روا باشد انالحق از درختی چرا نبود روا از نیکبختی. The utterance of I am God is admissible from a tree. So he's complaining here. He says, why did you execute Ḥallāj? Well, the Quran says Moses heard I am God from a tree. So if it is admissible to hear it from a tree, why is it not admissible to hear it from a well-destined, that is from Ḥallāj? Now, some people complain. By some people, it is me complaining. Yes, true. In this reading, every part of the world utters I am the truth. And yes, in divine ecstasy, one would hear that and realize that divine unity. However, I think Ḥallāj's pronouncing it so openly and loudly was not courteous in servanthood. Not everyone has the necessary educational or spiritual preparation to hear the secret. So it is to be veiled and only heard by those who are prepared. As Shabistarī himself says, self-assertion is fitting only to God and to him alone. So yes, one would, like the mystic, the Gnostic, would realize this in that ecstasy, but coming out, shouting it so loudly, was not so courteous in servanthood in relation to God. In Islamic metaphysics, it is said that the human is the servant and God is the Lord. So he should have staged the servant, and he should have let God do his lordship, and he should have kept this quiet. Now, in conclusion, in Shabistarí's thought, fanaʿ fi-llāh refers to the annihilation of the individual ego in the divine reality. In other words, it is a state of spiritual union with the divine, where the individual self is wholly absorbed in the presence of God, losing its sense of separate existence. However, while this concept is often translated as annihilation, it does not necessarily mean that the human being ceases to exist entirely. Instead, the human's created being is annihilated. However, the individual's reality, i.e., his fixed entity, remains intact. In fact, precisely this essence realizes its fundamental unity with the divine in the state of fanaʿ fi-llāh. Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope it helped clarify this concept, the concept of fanaʿ fi-llāh. If there is anything, please feel free to write it to me through email or in the comment section. Of course, in the comments we cannot have longer discussions, but in email we may do so. I'm looking forward to hosting you in my next videos. Please like and share to help the channel. Be well, be happy.